Thank you, Guillermo. Buenos dias. So, here we are, Cloud Day. I love this. Of all the world, and I go around the world, actually no one has thought of anything as clever as Kumo have. Let's just call a day Cloud Day. I think it's great. El Día de la Nube. So, why would you have someone come all this way to try and start off Cloud Day? Well, as you've heard, that's who I am, but that really doesn't explain why it's worth coming this way. So I thought, well, I was in my hotel room thinking, the one thing I love to do in a hotel room in the modern age, go and see what Google looks like where you are. So I thought I'd better go and see what it looks like in Colombia. I was so excited when I see, Colombia instead of the United Kingdom or somewhere. So I'm really excited. But then, of course, ego comes in and you think, I better just check that in Colombia, I am still findable on Google. Maybe if you're English, they just get rid of you. So I'm typing in Jeremy Geelan. I'm happy to say there are still 731,000 mentions of this stupid guy, Jeremy Geelan. So I'm thinking, good. Colombia, I might still survive. And then, remember that other thing in Google, that clever thing they now do with the technology called Ajax in the background? As you type, do you remember, it kind of tells you now who or what or why. So I type it in again, and look, I only have to get to the L, and suddenly it's Jeremy Geelan, cloud computing, and Jeremy Geelan. Oh, I'm feeling great. I'm thinking this is going to be a great morning, because even in Colombia, we can find out that Jeremy knows what he's talking about. But why cloud? So, as Guillermo said, it's really because I have the honor to have founded and run the world's largest cloud computing event. So, an event like this, but over 4 days, in a room 5 times the size for when people are talking, 50 times the size for when there are exhibits, and I've had the pleasure of being able to do that 11 times, 12th time coming up shortly in New York. So I'm just lucky. I talk to a lot of people who are interested in cloud computing, excited about cloud computing, and of course, some skeptical about cloud computing. So I have no brief. I'm not selling anything. My job on Cloud Expo is to bring all the different aspects of the cloud together, people trying to sell it, people trying to use it, people trying to break it, because that's another aspect we will talk about, the security. You heard Orlando talking about that again and again. So that's really why I'm here. Let me put on my hat as chairman of Cloud Expo. One of the things I'm able to do, of course, is to ask people who come to Cloud Expo why they've come. Instead of just watching them and enjoying it, let's ask them. So here's one guy, VP of Engineering, a small business. I know in general terms, cloud can help my business. Maybe some of you will relate to this. I just want to nail down how. The time has come. So a lot of people are coming for that reason, that they've heard about it, and now they've decided it's on my to-do list. In my company, I'm in charge of IT, or I'm the CEO. A lot of CEOs coming to Cloud Expo. I've got to make some decisions and then trickle down. Another guy, let's not bother to read all of this, but the importance here was that he is from the government. Again, you heard mention of the CIA. We'll talk about that again later. They know in the US government, in this instance, how important the cloud is for all sorts of reasons, which we'll talk about later. A lot of them for the government, cost. Drive cost out. Save US taxpayers money. That's a very compelling mission, and there are other good reasons too. And here was a startup. A startup. We'll be talking about that a lot. Why is it that cloud computing is so favorable if you've got a great idea? Well, because you can try it out. You don't have to earn servers anymore. As Orlando was saying, you can just have a little bit of someone else's server, and you can try stuff. And if it worked, oh my God, you can have one of those spikes. You can have a Pico, all of your own, and you're still only paying just a few pennies rather than masses of dollars. So there was why a startup come. But this was my favorite one. This was a guy who just confessed that he felt in his IT role that he was in what he called a hole. A hole. I said, okay. And he wanted to find out if cloud computing is maybe the ladder that he needed. And I thought, my God, this is brilliant. The cloud is, of course, for most people, and I'm sure that is going to be true of most of the people sitting in this room, it is potentially a tool. It's to get something done. So one of the themes of what I'm saying this morning will be this idea of what you choose in your head to think of the cloud of. What's the metaphor? So here's our first choice. It's a ladder. What's not to like about a ladder? Takes you from somewhere you are and gets you to somewhere you'd like to be, and it goes in little steps. It has everything going for it. So if the cloud is a ladder, and that's what you decide at the end of this day, then we all know you'll just need to try and find somewhere to stand the ladder, and you can start climbing. So let's hang on to these metaphors. They can be useful when there's so much technology and so many numbers. Sometimes it's just useful to remember it's a tool. Cloud computing is a tool. So if we're going to get our arms around the whole notion of cloud computing, just a few short minutes, I'm going to be as fast as possible. How best to do it? Let's just take a really simple structure. Let's look at the past, the present, and the future. And let's remember that one of the things that I do, or one of the reasons I've been invited, is because, a lot of children woke up. A lot of children were born, and one of the first things they say, is food. Or they say, Papa. I woke up and I said, why? And I haven't really ever stopped saying why. So one of the things I'm hoping by the time I'm finished that I can contribute to Kumo Day is that you will see lots of slides still about ¿qué es la nube? ¿Qué es la nube? And that's important. But I'm also going to try and answer ¿por qué es la nube? Because I think that's equally important. So that when you go home and your kids say, so what did you do all day, Dad? What did you do all day, Mom? You say, well, I talked about cloud computing. Cloud computing, wow. Amazing. Can I just ask you, Dad, Mom, why is that important? Why do we have cloud computing? Why is there such a fuss about it? And I guarantee you will be able to answer that question today so that your kids will understand. And I think they'll respect you for that and say, he's not just chasing technology, he's actually interested in why. So let's just slow down one moment and think about the past. And I think enjoy the past because, this has happened very fast for all of us. So let's just slow down the clock for a moment. Who remembers this whole idea of this fella? Personal computing. I mean, in the 60s, America largely was spending all this money on compute. It knew that compute was something. You could maybe fight wars with it, let's be honest. This is DARPA, this is Ministry of Defense money going in compute. They also used computers, because they had them in the 60s, to try and predict presidential elections. They thought, that could be good. I wonder if we can predict presidential elections using computers. This is all true. So we know that's going on in the background, but only really when we get to the 70s, you and I get involved. Remember the 70s? So 1975. I think people forget that. Microsoft was founded in 1975 only. So all this other stuff that had been going on didn't yet translate into our homes or our workplaces. That only begins around about the mid-70s. 1975, Apple was founded in 1976. You heard that reference to Steve Jobs. So now we've got two enormous companies already getting interested in computing. And you'd think that with all that energy, it's just been a straight line to where we are sitting here today. But it really hasn't, because from 1975 and 1976, when we're all getting excited about computers, a lot of us are just using them to type on. We're just really typing. It's a typewriter, but it's an expensive typewriter. So I would contend that not until 1989, so that's quite a few years, well over a decade, not until 1989 did something really interesting happen. And it was a Brit. It was an Englishman who made this happen. There he is. Tim Berners-Lee. Now, Sir Tim Berners-Lee invents with others at CERN in Switzerland the World Wide Web. Now we're talking. So there's the internet as infrastructure, but the World Wide Web allowed us, you and me, to interact with it. We just needed a thing called a browser, and that had to take some shape, and everybody had to try, and some came and some went, and Netscape was blasted out by Microsoft. And we all remember these things. We take it for granted now, but there it was. Not till 1989 could we start to put things into the web, take them out of the web. Hey, this is a new kind of computing. And the best way that was explained, and now you'll see why I'm talking about this, is because all these things that talks now to the web, there was our PC, there are the things we're getting used to today. We've got storage arrays, we've got all these things connected to the net. And they used to draw a cloud. That was how it was always drawn. We didn't have the word yet. We didn't say cloud computing. But everyone was trying to explain that there was this space where things could join up. You go up and then back down again. And then we know, to go fast forward to everything that's been happening recently, we now know, don't we, that other things are now being connected to the internet, to this cloud-like thing. In fact, everything's being connected to it. Your fridge, your washing machine. You can turn off your electricity in your house when you're at work. You can track your children. Everything is up in the net, back down to your device or your desktop or however you want to use the web. So it's all great, it's all good, it's all sexy, but we've got a problem. That's a lot of journeys. In and out and in and out. Kettles and fridges and washing machines. What we referred to earlier there, you heard. The Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is huge. We'll talk about how huge in a bit, but just trust me, this leads to problems. And the best way to look at it from a technical perspective is this. If you're a network guy, you have this rule of thumb. You build something, build a system, build a website for that matter. If the basic conditions change by one order of magnitude, so 10 times, so perhaps the number of users or the amount of data or whatever, if there's a change by an order of magnitude, it's probably time to have a look at the system. Actually, it is time. It's already too late. Don't let something increase 10 times without checking it. So, how does that relate to the internet then? Who was checking on the internet? Let's just see. My mathematics is that there's something called the 100 times effect. So not one order of magnitude, two. The 100 times effect. Now, what can that mean? It means as follows. The early internet, because after all, it was very successful very quickly, had 10 million users. What a huge number. 10 million users, everyone thought. But now we've got 1 billion. So that's 100 times. 100 times is a lot of times. The early internet had 1 million websites. Now we've got 100 million. Again, 100 times. Why did no one check this at 10 times? But they didn't. We're all excited. So just when you think that those numbers are big enough, along comes an even bigger number, which is the total number of connected devices has reached 5 billion already. Again, 100 times growth easily from a decade ago. So we're kind of 10 times too late looking at this. And the reason I tell you all this in the context of cloud computing is that what we needed, you heard, you saw the spikes with Madonna there from Orlando's presentation. What would be really nice is if when all those journeys are happening, we had compute power, and when they're not happening, we don't, and we don't have to pay for it. Wouldn't that be great? So we needed, just as he said, this notion of elasticity, and that is what has come to the rescue. We need enormous elasticity to service this Internet of Things before we even discover how to make money out of it. We've got to at least support it so it's still working. Then we can think of the clever applications to tell us when our fridge is full or when it's empty and to tell us whether our children made it home from school or not without them having to tell us. And all those good things that are going to happen when everything is connected to everything else. And that is where we needed something radical. This was an inflection point, and the inflection point required a totally new architecture, a totally different way of looking at compute load so we could spread it, so we could be everywhere, wherever the world needed it. And cloud computing is the new architecture. So that is the reason we're all here. And then there's another reason. This guy kickstarts it all on November the 4th. This is an issue from November the 14th in 2006. So just think, we just said Apple was founded in 1976. It takes till 2006 till something like this happens. This is the CEO of Amazon, who was referred to earlier, Jeff Bezos, and he takes what Business Week called was a risky bet. What is his risky bet? He thinks this infrastructure thing, this is going to be really big. He thinks, I bet that people who want to get involved in this next wave of internet business, I bet they'd like it if I could tell them, you don't need a server room anymore. You don't need to maintain all this hardware anymore. You don't need to own buildings anymore. You can just rent it from Amazon Web Services. So we just sell you books when you want them. Why don't we sell you compute power when you want it? So that, to me, 2006 is like the end of the past, and then we're going on to the present. These are the sorts of slides you're going to see all day long, so I'm not anyway, going to delay us with this. Here are the basic generic benefits of cloud computing, all to do, as you heard Orlando say, with this only paying what you need, all to do with this incredible ability to scale up when Madonna's a hit, but not pay when she's not making records. She's on holiday. We don't want to pay for the servers. You will hear all of this. You will hear about the service model. You will hear also from me about the automation side of things, because this is all new, that these things are just doing their own thing while we're all asleep. I'm going to give you hard examples, though, of people already using the cloud. And I thought, because I had to fly here, obviously, not by EasyJet, but just to take an example, because I think we can get our arms around it. EasyJet is not the world's largest airline. It's a little niche player trying to sell airline seats cheaper than anyone, and it's succeeding. One of the reasons it's succeeding is cloud computing. It's succeeding. It has no internal IT budget. I mean, that sounds like an overstatement, but it really doesn't. It realized that the speed with which it was growing saved the money to buy new planes. That's the core business of EasyJet. It's an airline. So it went actually to Microsoft. It doesn't matter who, but it happened to choose Microsoft. And off they went. Everything is now just a transaction with Microsoft. They don't have to have their own IT department. So EasyJet, it must be a pretty reliable thing, mustn't it? Which we're going to hear again and again, if you can fly using cloud computing. You guys have got the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, so I figured you know a bit about shipping. Maersk, the world's largest shipping company, Maersk, went to the cloud. What did Maersk want? It's not worried about ships coming down out of the sky, but it is worried about the fact that ships sail all over the world. It has to be global. What is cloud computing, if not the ultimate global system? So that's very, very exciting for a company the size of Maersk. This is the world's largest shipping firm. We mentioned them earlier. The CIA. Wow. The CIA has spent is going to spend, we should put it in the future tense. This was an announcement made just on March the 12th, so this really is hot off the press. $600 million they're going to be paying Amazon Web Services from now on to be in the cloud. And we'll talk about why that's surprising when we talk about public cloud versus private cloud, which you'll hear also a lot of today. So Amazon had the notion, we just explained it, didn't we, that you could just rent compute power. But it also had the notion that it had to make money out of this. So, don't go asking me to put your data here and Jeremy's data next and you're going to complain. You know what? It's just public space. I'm Amazon, I'm going to put your data there, Jeremy's there, Orlando's there, Guillermo's there. You don't have any say in that. And that was its model. And fantastic for small businesses, for individuals, for creative IT people. Not so good though if you're a bank. If I'm Guillermo's bank and put his data there and I'm Jeremy's bank and that doesn't work so well. So Amazon, in selling this $600 million contract to the CIA, has actually realized that, you know what, you also have to be able to provide what's called private cloud. So it has all the benefits of cloud computing, but it's perhaps in an isolated data center. So you get this odd combination of new and old. Don't think that the cloud means there are no data centers, as we've seen from Kumo themselves. It's all premised on having two enormous data centers. Kids maybe don't understand that. You know, when they're using Facebook, they don't think of servers and they don't think of data centers. But we know better, right? We're a little older, so we should know these things. We should be tech savvy. Ford is an example I use not because of security like the CIA or because of the global reach like with Maersk or because of reliability like with EasyJet, but because Ford is very clever in being the first company to realize that cars are becoming more and more cloud connected. That's the selling point of all the premier brands, Mercedes, all the premier brands tell you how connected you'll be in your car. A car will probably very soon have an IP address to play as part of that. So on the Internet of Things, we'll know what the car is, where the car is. We won't know who's in it, but we'll know an awful lot of data about cars. That has enormous possible benefits for traffic control. So just like the Internet, we all got used to, right? Our messages, we know, probably most of us, the Internet routes some this way, some that way. It all joins at the other end. Traffic. Maybe traffic's going to start to move more like the Internet. I know in Bogota you have problems, right? So maybe you look forward to this. That the cloud car will be something that will come and rescue. And that's a fascinating, for me anyway, it's a fascinating, again, inflection point. So because I'm a conference guy, here's a picture of the head of Ford's making an announcement at a tech conference because they realized that, you know, really the modern car is just going to be like a computer with 4 wheels, more or less. And they want to get ahead of that and plant in people's minds that it's Ford that got there first. So these are huge names that I hope will show you and reinforce and embolden you to realize that there are really big brands now staking their everything on cloud computing. Zynga I won't spend too much time on because it's going to be mentioned a lot today, also from you'll hear when Michael Crandall speaks later on. Zynga is a gaming. I'm not myself a great gamer. I know it's now gone into online gambling. I'm not an online gambler either, so it's not one of my, you know, top uses myself. But Zynga has been an interesting use case of this spikeability, this ability to cope with sudden bursts. It started off with Farmville. Does Farmville make any headway in Colombia? You see, no one plays Farmville. I didn't play Farmville, but everyone else did apparently, and they had these huge amounts of users, you know, coming week after week, and they weren't expecting it. So the cloud was a perfect thing for them. Now there were other issues, so they've invented something called Z Cloud, and it's partly public and partly private, and it's going very well. 1.4 petabytes of data they have, which makes them so much bigger than other things. I think that's 10 times more than Netflix, which is, you know, downloading movies. So huge amounts of data and all in the cloud. And then let's just finish this section with another example that I think if you saw, you know, a lot of logos in Orlando's slides, but there they were, Dropbox. I don't know if you use them, but it doesn't matter. You know that people store stuff in the cloud, and an awful lot of people store stuff in Dropbox's cloud. 100 million users they now have. I mean, this is just like a company from yesterday. 100 million users. So data going in and out, just like that diagram, in and out. So upload it, that was stage 1, but stage 2 is download it, because now I needed it again. All these journeys, up and down, 1 billion files served every day. So that's all happening now, just as these other presenters will be telling you. It's all happening now. So, wow, what could this be the beginning of? Also for Colombia. Let's end with that section. The future. What is the future of the cloud? There's a number, that's the CTO of Cisco, and that is the number that she believes actually represents the number of devices connected to what we were talking about, this Internet of Things. That, for those of you who don't do mathematics, is what a trillion looks like, written out. A trillion devices, because this thing is moving faster than anyone understands, except Cisco, who have always sat in, not in charge of the network, but they have a large chunk of it. So when someone like the CTO of Cisco tells you there's 1 trillion devices soon about to be connected, you really need to prick up your ears and work out. But why is that relevant? Here's one of the reasons it's relevant. All those journeys are pushing data, and they're pushing it fast. And they're pushing it, and it's getting larger and larger. We talked about Dropbox, which might be video files, photos. But what about these, like I talked about? What about the cars? What about constant information of where each car is? Every 5 seconds, say? Every 5 seconds, up and down, and then doing something with it. This is the concept of big data, which you will be hearing so much more about, not only today, but every time you pick up a newspaper, every time you look at a magazine, all this year, all next year, and really for the rest of our lives, we'll be hearing about big data, whether that's the term or not. Because think what can be done now that we have cloud computing, and if we suddenly need to figure something out, we can do it because we've got the compute power. We didn't even have to plan that we were going to do it. There's a marvelous example last week. President Obama, bless him, who, they think maybe half got to power using the internet, so he's, very tech savvy. He appointed a big data czar. That's what they call the leader of something in America. This was just last week. It was in November. Appointed a big data czar, and the journalists, of course, all came up to him and said, "So what is big data, Mr. President?" And he went, he knows, because I've just made him the big data czar. And then he's smart, Obama, because he realized that to be a cool president, you should have been able to answer that question. So at this press conference, really just a few minutes later, he came back on and said, over there you were asking what big data is. Let me tell you what big data is. He suddenly said, so somebody briefed him, he said, big data is knowing that Mrs. Jones buys 3 pounds of beef every Wednesday, but not in the winter time, and seems to keep it in her fridge for about 5 days, but we don't know what to do with that. So he was very candid, that big data is accumulating, but not yet quite knowing what to do with it. I give that traffic example. I think I know exactly what to do with the data of where cars are. You can make things easier for traffic. The CIA, big data play. Why do you think they want that cloud? All they want to do is crunch every phone call ever made, every voice print of they just want to put it somewhere and then be able, at the drop of a hat, or even worse, the drop of a bomb, they want to be able to find out. So who was it in the last year that talked about that place the bomb went off, that talked about that person that it liquidated over the last year? And we need to know in the next 27 minutes, because we've got something flying towards there to bomb it into. So there's also maybe scary implications. But big data is being accumulated at a massive scale, so you need to be aware of that. How many people in this room have got a mobile phone? Come on, you've all got a mobile phone. Someone knows where that mobile phone is. Do you know that? Do you know that someone knows where your mobile phone is? You don't have much say in that matter. In America, by edict, every phone at all times, it is possible for the government to summon that data when it becomes relevant. I'm not suggesting that America has become totalitarian, although it does beg an interesting question if the wrong person got a hold of that data. But again, that's big data for you. We can now keep it somewhere because we've got the cloud. We can just keep extending, keep extending, keep extending, keep extending. The CIO of the CIA, the CTO, the Chief Technical Officer of the CIA, came and spoke at one of my conferences, and he was the first person to admit. He said, you need to think about that phone. You want to maybe turn it off, because I just this morning had a meeting saying, I want to be able to store every telephone conversation that any American ever has. And I had to find out how much that would cost in terms of infrastructure, and I was told, now you know why I went to Amazon. If you have to do it yourself, that's a lot of money. And he might only have to do it one time next year, one time. So for him, Amazon is a great idea. Pay when I need to find the bad guys, but not otherwise. Another initialism, just so we're covering this front so you don't say, Jeremy didn't tell me about that one. You heard it. Let's just quickly say what it is. Actually, I'm not sure you did hear this yet, but you've heard it now. SMAC, social, mobile, analytics, cloud. When they all come together, what does that mean? Well, a typical example would be, again, looking at your handhelds, how many people are nearby a shop in central Bogota, and how many of those people might be very interested in buying an umbrella because it's now raining, and how about we send them an SMS saying umbrellas are now half price at a shop that's really 10 yards from where you're standing. And of course, that's totally possible now, thanks to the cloud, thanks to the analytics that say who's there, and because it can be done so very, very fast. So you will hear SMAC. You already heard this one. Bring your own device. That is to do with how on earth a company is going to deal with the fact that everybody's used to their phone, not the company phone, their phone. And they're used to their laptop, not the company laptop. And they bring them to work. And what about the problems there if now all the company confidential secrets are moving about by email, which is very easy to hack? Files can be just quickly lifted off a thumb drive. So bring your own device has got issues in this cloud era where we need to look at the physical security of devices. So not on that grand scale, not on the data center being protected by armed guards, but on the very simple level of making sure that if somebody's laptop or somebody's device is left on a train, that a company can close it down instantly and don't have any security risks there. So you'll see BYOD again in those articles that you're going to be reading when you're fired up about the cloud after leaving this day. Here's what I think is happening that you need to know. IT, which is, our acronym in English, I don't know how this will work now in Spanish, is trending towards BT. So not so much that it's all to do with information, but it's all to do with business. It's all to do with, can we make money, or can we make a government better? Can we get stuff done? That's what I think of as business, is getting stuff done. So I think, forget about information now. Let's just think about the Internet of Things as a place to get stuff done, and we just have to work out what that stuff is. I call it, this is my 600-pound gorilla, I call it co-technology. I wanted just one word that sums all this up. It's my own word. I hope that you'll all use it so that it gets spread around. Co-technology, what could be more simple? The best and first example of co-technology was email. I type into my little machine, press one button, and it comes to your little machine when you press your button. So now we work together. That was asynchronous. That was I do it in the morning, you maybe read it when you want. Now most things are synchronous. You're getting those SMSs or those tweets all the time, or those Facebook messages in real time. I don't know whether that's good or bad, but it's now, that's the world we're living in, so let's take that on board, because obviously we can do things better together. Thank you for Guillermo for using that phrase of mine to do with cointeligencia, which I do believe in. I think this is one of the revolutions that's coming, and this is the one that's really just beginning, and this is the one that companies like Kumo are absolutely accelerating. They're accelerating the business. Coca-Cola, a completely global firm. What could be more global than Coca-Cola? I believe you can buy Coca-Cola in more countries in the world than any other product ever. Ever, ever, ever. I don't know if they're in North Korea, but they probably are. Every country in the world. So when they've gone into the cloud for their communications, you know that, again, they think it's safe, they think it's fast, they think it's cheap, they think it can get huge, all the things that we talked about. Skype. There's a hidden potential for technology in Skype. My children are all over the world. I couldn't do without Skype. Still not really charging for it. Still actually making a loss. This is, watch this. What are Microsoft going to do? There are so many things waiting to happen in the realm of co-technology. But the other reason I choose Skype is because Colombia has 44 million people, right? But Skype, and if I can find it, my map comes from this tiny little country called Estonia, with just 2 million people, not even 2 million people. So Skype, which hasn't yet, I think, found its real role in the world, comes from a tiny little country. So how about a bigger country with access to this Atlantic Ocean and to the Pacific? Oh my goodness, how many things, how many good things cloud-enabled good things are going to come from Colombia. Use this mic. I'm switching. That's what it was for. We talked about metaphors, so let's wind up quickly with a quick survey of what is the best metaphor to go with. I saw in the Spanish there that you're also thinking of it as a road. I think that's a fruitful one. You know, we had the ladder going up, but the road can take you anywhere. It's probably more imaginative than a ladder. No one controls where your car goes. You control. There has to be a road, but that's what we've got with the cloud. So perhaps it's a network for business innovation that's like a huge road network. Or is it this? Is it, you know, wow, get ready for takeoff. You can tell this American background. I'm not American, but they've infected me with this sense of, you know, blast off. Cloud computing is the way to the stars. And then I'm thinking, well, next time I'm in my hotel room, I'm going to start not with Jeremy Geelan, that was very egotistical, but with Colombia. And I want to see come up, look, Colombia food, yeah, good. Colombia women, I mean, marvelous. But what about Colombian cloud and Colombian technology and Colombian innovation? So I'm going to keep this promise that in 1 year's time on this day, I'm going to do that. I hope I can do it in Colombia again. And I'm going to look and see what comes up in Google's auto suggest for how you've managed to grasp this opportunity that is just beginning today with Kumo Day. I know you have mountains, so I thought I would just give one little mountain picture, because here's something I also believe in. We were talking about co-intelligence. Russell Bryce climbed Everest. I mean, 1,000, 1,500 people have climbed Everest, so what? Russell Bryce was smart. When he came down, he said, you know what? I wonder if I should even have bothered to climb Everest, because what I reckon I can do is I can impart my wisdom, my experience of climbing Everest to other people so they can climb Everest. I bet that way more people could climb Everest than just me. So that's a way of leveraging my intelligence, my experience. So although he didn't use technology to do that, I mean, he probably did, email, websites, but, you know, this is not a huge infrastructure play. I've anointed him to be the CIO of this new cloud-enabled era, because I hope the cloud is going to be all about helping to do things better, faster, more securely, more imaginatively, more widespread, all the good things that I see being accelerated by cloud computing. And then, since we're on odd pictures that Jeremy is determined to finish you with, why don't we look at that very, very famous man, if you're in Canada anyway, the world's most famous, if I can make this work, which it won't work, the world's most famous ice skater, Wayne Gretzky. I'm not an ice skating fan, but I am, as you know, a fan of people who've got a good phrase. And Wayne Gretzky has a great phrase. He was asked by journalists, because he was just sovereign. I mean, that cup is the size of, you know, half the planet, and he was winning everything in sight. And they wanted to ask him, what was his secret? You know, he was always just there scoring these goals. And they asked him, you know, how is it that you're always there at the right moment? You know, is that what you're paid for? And he was clever. He accepted the compliment, and he knew that they meant well, but he wanted to put them right. So he was a bit like a Jeremy. He wanted to put them right and make them understand what he was really paid for. And he said, no, you know what I'm paid to do? I'm not paid. You think it's that I'm always where the puck is and I score the goal. But that's not what they pay me for. What they pay me for is to skate where the puck is going. That's why I'm always there. And what we're showing you in Kumo Day is where the puck, the technology puck, is going. So you now have the chance, like Wayne Gretzky, to be what's next. Thank you very much. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because if there are any questions, I'm going to be given some kind of headset, or I'm looking for instructions now. Now, you know that thing about questions. No one likes asking them.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Bueno, la mecánica para las preguntas, por favor, vamos a pasar micrófonos. ¿Me ayudan con los micrófonos? Le hacemos la pregunta y los señores le traducen la pregunta al señor Jeremy. Y de esa manera les vamos a responder. ¿Alguien quiere empezar? ¿Micrófono? ¿Me ayudan? Las niñas, ¿preguntas? Aquí tienen una.
Gracias, felicitaciones por este tema. Quisiera saber qué pasa con la información si alguien decide retirarse, digamos, hay confidencialidad de esta información, los datos quedan allá en la nube o cómo se recuperan. Pues aunque yo creo que son tantas las ventajas que la persona no quisiera salirse, pero se puede dar el caso. Esa información que está allá en la nube, ¿cómo hace para rescatarla? Número 1. Número 2. ¿Qué riesgos tiene en cuanto a confidencialidad y seguridad y protección del gobierno para estos lugares? Porque seguramente los enemigos quisieran bombardear ese sitio exactamente y se perdió todo. Gracias.
Obviously, two very important questions. So let's take them in order. I think that your question about, what happens to all the things we've put up in the cloud is not really a technical question, but to do with custom and practice. So I can give a very practical example, a rather shocking one, which we don't think about and I don't think was publicized, but let's take an example. Somebody's Facebook page, any idea what happens the day you die? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Who thinks on the day that they lose a loved one, who thinks, oh my God, I must close down their Facebook page? Of course we don't, but we're going to have to. Yeah, so a lot of the impetus must be on us to say, now let me just find out, what the death clause is for my personal services. Yeah, that lies on us. Then your example, so that doesn't solve all problems, and we need good policy and we need good guidance, but we don't want somebody who dies in a horrible road crash to suddenly have notes from the people he killed on his Facebook page. I mean, that does not serve any purpose, and that is what will happen unless we get ahead of some of these things. So I don't think that's really a cloud problem, but it's certainly it's something that's becoming increasingly common because of these cloud applications. The government example, which again, I like that. You're wearing your citizen's hat, and we should all be aware of that. But again, there's the thing. You're a citizen. I'm a citizen. So we have to have a view on that. How can we have a view on that? We can have a view by when you have a far-sighted minister like you have, backing him. It's amazing how in some of the smaller countries, not known for IT, they have amazing IT ministers because they realize how much can be done in terms of saving government money, in terms of all these things, but they also then have this incredible sophistication to answer your question. I bet you here in Colombia, there's a better solution to that already than maybe even in America, where they're protecting old information very often. So the newer country has got this advantage, I believe, sort of this strange, the law of when you get there first, that's normally good, except in IT, where sometimes coming second is actually better because you don't have to learn and make the errors. So as citizens, I would urge you to be vigilant about your own data and about how governments use data. And if you think that's too obscure and what does my information have to do with terrorism, just think about the health sector. We talked about big data. The biggest possible user of cloud computing is the health sector, because think of that up, down, up, down. We put medical information up into the cloud because we don't just do it just because it's cheaper than storing it in cabinets, although it is as well. We do it so that when the surgeon comes to the side of the road and finds the patient, he can quickly access who the patient is and what other conditions he has instantly in real time. There's a great big data application enabled by the cloud. But wow, what issues there? If all my medical data is up in the cloud and it's not being carefully protected? So again, as citizens, when our health sector says, okay, from tomorrow, everything that we used to have on paper is up there, we need as citizens to say, whoa, okay, okay, up there and next to whose? And who has the authority to do that? And then, as you rightly asked, what happens? Does that data ever expire? Because I can tell you, our medical data is an amazing resource for medicine. But we don't necessarily know which of the data is going to be fantastically valuable for maybe 20 years. So we will, for health reasons, want to keep all the data. So again, this idea of keeping it secure becomes, 1,000 times more important, because it is going to be kept. You need to know that. Every piece of data created from now on, when you leave this room, just so you know, is going to be kept. So please be vigilant as to who is keeping it and what their policies are. Does that answer? He waves his hand. I hope that's good.
Nueva pregunta.
Buenos días, muchas gracias por la invitación. Oyendo hablar sobre Big Data, me preguntaba cuál va a ser la privacidad de cada ser humano en el futuro. Me preguntaba también qué pasa con el espíritu, qué pasa con el ser humano, qué va a pasar con ese universo. Usted, que ha sido una persona que ha visualizado el universo hacia adelante, ¿qué piensa sobre eso? Gracias.
Well, there's big data and there's big philosophy. But you know what? That is a great question, because I'm honored that you would ask that of me. I'm honored that you would ask it out loud with all your contemporaries, because in lots of countries they won't. So God bless you for saying that. It's a huge question, and I have great difficulty myself. That example of, me Googling my name, the reason I do that is because I know that you Google your name or your company's name. Of course you do. And there is something existential about this, that somehow our persona has become mediated by the very thing that Jeremy's talking up and down about and saying is absolutely unbelievably good and can help make better worlds and more money. But of course there is this flip side, that I know I have a colleague who literally, and he is a CEO, literally addicted to Twitter, can barely now go to sleep because someone's awake, tweeting. How can he go to sleep when someone might be mentioning him or not mentioning him, even worse? So he's now trying to stay awake 24 hours a day. How long will it last? So there are existential questions, but guess always comes back to the same thing. The guidance can't come from outside. Maybe it can come from the church, I don't know. But I think it's going to come from within. And it's going to come from us leaving a room like this, and of course, remembering all the business names and remembering all the business applications, but also remembering that before we go to work, we're fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, cousins. We're people. So clearly, we should be thinking about these issues, and we should be wondering. I think this is, a new phrase, data expiry, this notion of, and is that what dying is? Is that, data expiry? It's when you go, but no longer. So what does that mean? And I give you one, I wouldn't normally say this, but I think it will be an example where I am on that. So we talked about Steve Jobs and about Apple. I have only one thing in common with Steve Jobs, who's smarter and, thinner and more successful. He got pancreatic cancer. So did I. He had this extraordinary operation which sort of rearranges you and takes most of you out. So did I. He died. I'm still here, so there's perhaps a bit of luck involved. But you know what? Along the way, I wonder whether his data and my data, added together and divided by 2, maybe we find a better way to help other pancreatic cancer patients. So when I'm gone, I'm going to tick the box that says you can keep everything you know about me. Absolutely, please. I mean, with my full blessing. Not my financial data, but my health data. Not my letters to my lover, but my health data. So I think we will just get a really sophisticated system where you leave a will, a kind of, an information will, if you like, saying what you expect your estate to do with things like that, with your presence. Hasn't really happened yet. The internet's so young. Hasn't really happened, but people are beginning to die. Yes, we're all beginning to die. Then it's going to get interesting.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, ¿aló? Nos quedan 2 preguntas. Vamos a ir al público izquierdo. ¿No han preguntado? ¿Alguien quiere preguntar por este lado?
Can I ask the question in English?
Oh, please do.
Okay, thanks. Well, Jeremy, good morning. Thank you. Very good presentation. My question, I think, is a simple one, but hopefully one that we are all asking ourselves. What I like the most about your presentation is why. I think we are in a society that is increasingly more impatient. We need answers at our fingertips. We need answers by our friends, our colleagues. And one of the things that I think that would be nice to hear from you, perhaps, is how do we ask ourselves those really important questions to be part of a structure, let's say like the one that we find at Kumo, a corporation. How do we find the right questions so that we're not just part of a structure, but we're also constantly asking ourselves the right questions so we can be part of something that is more meaningful to us and also to society. I hope the question is clear.
The question is clear, and the question is, again, of course, incredibly difficult to answer, but that doesn't make it a difficult question. It's a great question, and it's the simplest question of all. How many of us have got kids? What do they all do? They just ask why all day long. And really, I'm one of those people who believes, you are only as good a parent as you have answered those questions all their lives, and hopefully forever, is questions. You have to ask. You have to ask, let's take a company scenario. You have to ask, so I gather that the team is agreeing to move into the cloud, let's say, and the team is agreeing to use Kumo or use someone else. And am I going to be privy to the reasoning? And may I be privy to the reasoning? Because I think it also affects me, because the company is just a function of all its employees. The same with the government. We've talked about that. Your civic duty as a citizen is to say, so if we're going to put all this traffic information into the cloud so that we can clear up the traffic clog in Bogota in the rush hour, what about, does that also mean that you're allowed to be used in court when you parked your car outside your mistress and your wife wants to divorce you? And I don't have the answer to that. And I think different societies will make different judgment calls. And children, this is the one staggering statistic, children don't yet seem, in the age that we've talked about, that age, all the ones under Future, all those applications, the gaming ones, the Facebooks, all the children who have used that have no concept of privacy whatsoever. And I talk with them all the time, my own, and I talk with others. No concept, no sense that there are any downsides. Oh, Dad, you exaggerate so much. And it really, so long as everybody's equal, we know everything about everyone, it's all kind of equal. No. There are so many circumstances, alter cases. There are so many things that should not be known. And one should be able to choose that. I strongly believe that. So whether it's civic or governmental or company or your own life, you have to make those decisions. And we can't get away from that. And if anything, the internet has made that more important to make these decisions. Just a simple decision. It doesn't matter if it's a better policy. So on this specific instance, we can see, you're absolutely right, every time there is a hacking attack, every time there is cyber warfare, if it's between countries, or commercial warfare, of which there's, of course, an enormous amount, everybody gets to adjust. Everybody gets to adjust. The only thing that you could be told off for is not adjusting. So I don't think I'm going to say, let's go protectionist, let's build, firewalls around each country. It can't work. China is the best example. There was this great pun of the great firewall of China because you couldn't get anything useful. You couldn't get onto Google, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You couldn't get onto Facebook. But you know what? Now you can get onto all those things because other people said, but we want that. We're Chinese people, we're smart, we want to be part of the modern world. So they found proxy servers in countries that could get on to the internet, and then they just disguised the IP addresses. Of course, they've been using Facebook big in the name. They have their own, but they've been using those kinds of applications like crazy. So there isn't any way of firewalling usage. Information there is. There's only one technical term I'll send you away with. You can go and look it up. Tokenization is one answer. There are many more technical people coming this day who will talk about that, but really simply, why put anything up into the cloud without encrypting it first? So you're down on Earth, you have the key. Up in the cloud, it's simply meaningless. Simply meaningless. And it is quite simple. So governments have understood that, and soon I think companies are understanding it, and perhaps as individuals we will understand it. Wouldn't it be lovely if it just didn't mean anything? All my email, to go back to your example of what happens when you die, it would all be meaningless because only I had the token that made it mean anything. And with my expiry, my token expired, all my data expires unless I decide otherwise. So I think the news is really good, that we are so aware of it, it's so public, that, again, we go back to my thing of the none of us is smarter than all of us. This is a great example of collective wisdom, of the wisdom, what's called the wisdom of crowds. The more things go wrong, the quicker, nowadays, that it's made right. And then something else goes wrong. But then, luckily, the quicker that's made right. And that's just the world we've moved into. And you know what? That's something that technology has helped us with. So you could say it's helped with the problems, but it's also helped with the solutions. So you have to choose. You have to choose. Thank you very much for your questions, your time, and thank you for the invitation, Orlando. Enjoy the rest of Kumo Day.